The question shouldn't be, how can we increase the conversion rate? Because that's just the outcome. How can we increase the experience, as you said, for the user, putting customer first, understanding what they're about, why they're shopping with you, understanding their behavior. That's how you make progress.
Hey, it's Becca. Welcome to another episode of Click to Buy. In today's episode, we'll be discussing things like how to create an experimentation mindset or how to calculate the ROI on your CRO practices. And today's guest is Nils. Nils, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Becca. It's been a while and a lot of back and forth to actually get me on here. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
You're hard to pin down, but I think it'll be great to have your insights here today. Well, for those of you who don't know who Nils is, I would love it if you could give a little description of who you are, what it is that you do when you're not on this podcast.
Sure. Whenever I'm not here, I'm the founder and consultant at the same time at 3Tech. We're a CRO and experimentation agency / consultancy specializing in, CRO, A/B testing, experimentation, and basically helping companies grow using the aforementioned methods. And that's what we do. And I think, generally speaking, I think you had said in the intro, a lot not only has to do with the tactics, but also with actually sparking an experimentation mindset, like in companies, to help them better understand their users and hence make the right decisions going forward.
Maybe that's a great question to kind of kickstart this episode. In your experience, what's the best ways that companies can encourage this experimentation mindset within their company?
So it's actually a good one because it's a question that I also regularly reiterate on myself, because it's one of the key things that, of course, I want to instill when working with companies, either those that already have a certain level of experimentation maturity or companies that are just starting out. But I think one of the most important things is taking out the ego in whatever it is they're doing. So, for example, take a company that has a UX department. A lot of the times, and this is not pointing fingers at anyone, but a lot of the times there is already very preconceived ideas of how things should be. And of course, that then makes those things then go into the actual development cycles, and that's what users see. But what I oftentimes try to then instill, or at least inspire people to do, is like to talk to actual users, to talk to customers, find out why people don't have made a certain kind of action or something, right? And really understand why users are coming to you, why they love your products. And I think, this is one part, but generally helping companies or like be open to new ideas, even if they're like 180 degrees or the total opposite of what they have done so far. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing everything wrong. Sometimes it's just like little nuggets where people would be super surprised. Oh, really? We didn't think that way. And so I think like being very much open to discovering new things and like letting down this ego to a certain degree, to not just keep posturing on your own opinion, because it's been the same way for years, and we've done this like for years that way. So I think this is a hard transition, though. It's not easy. And I often find that, especially within well-established companies, that's a real challenge, because people have not lived necessarily, but like worked in their frameworks before, and it's getting harder to change those things. In newer companies with newer spirit, this is oftentimes easier, but it's a challenge either way. For well-established companies, this kind of transition, or even just allowing themselves to ask these kind of questions, is sometimes rather difficult, because certain mindsets have already been set in stone in a way. With newer companies or less established companies, or companies that have more drive in them in a way, right? This is easier. But yeah.
Nice. And I guess maybe bouncing off that question, I know that when you're trying to get companies to think about incorporating experimentation or CRO practices, sometimes that means getting someone from the outside, maybe like yourself. Other times it means like upskilling people who are already in your company who maybe want to grow in that direction. Do you have any advice on resources that people who want to get better at these sorts of skills can use or can access to level themselves up?
I mean, it totally. I know people hate this answer, but it totally depends what kind of company you are, and
Yeah.
how you're set up. Let me just give you one example for if you're a company that doesn't have internal resources to tackle
Hmm.
A/B testing. Usually, the way to go is to start with a freelancer, an agency, or somebody who can start building up processes, and like running the first test, but also doing the underlying
Hmm.
research, right? Um,
True.
Usually, one person can't do that, at least not in the long term, to actually fulfill the needs that the company has, and also the kind of trust the company puts into one person to just do this. So what I usually recommend, that even though being an agency, I think building out internal teams, especially after a certain amount of time, I think
Hmm.
just makes a lot of sense. And still, like, then we do this with a couple of our clients, where we then still come in, help, and then that's the point where, yeah, the upskilling comes in. Like, make
Hmm.
sure that the people in the company do have the right skills, develop in the I hate the word or the term right direction, but like that they're developing in the best, like in the best way
Hmm.
to actually fulfill the CRO and experimentation needs that the company does have. So I think there's, depending on where you're at, like what level of maturity you're at, then
Hmm.
getting outside help, or building up internal capacity can definitely make sense. The needs at each one of those stages
Yeah,
is vastly different. So I would probably like do it on a case by case basis. But yeah. But you,
that's true.
I think I kind of evaded your question because you were asking about resources, and I think
Yeah. So let's
so.
let's say someone's maybe at a smaller company, maybe they have a budget, or maybe there's somebody in a, I know we actually spoke about this in my last guest, who mentioned that sometimes it's at like smaller startups and things where people are encouraged to like take on other skills and whatnot just because they don't have maybe the budget to hire everyone.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's maybe more of like a self-starter or just like really wants to help out, they see this need in their company, like where would you go or where would you send someone to?
So there is an awesome experimentation and CRO community. You'd probably find a lot of
Hmm.
people on LinkedIn. Someone
Sure.
I really love pointing people towards is Ruben de Boer. Not sure if he's been on the podcast or if he's
He
planned, but
has.
he has.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
And like his resources are spectacular, especially when you're a beginner, especially when you need help and guidance to do the first steps to really understand how research, testing, evaluating the results, but also overall strategy, how they all come together. I think the courses
Hmm.
and even his newsletter is like a good real good deal of resource to go to. Apart from that, what I sometimes recommend people looking into, it's of course a lot more complex, and but is the
Hmm.
courses on CXL. But especially when you're looking at upskilling, they have a wide range of resources that you can look into. That said, I am also a big fan of doing research and then applying the knowledge gained from research, or the inspiration,
Hmm.
right? So I think nobody becomes an expert, or can't even get started without really
Hmm.
actually having something that they can apply it to. So if you have a company website or an online shop, the best, and you want to build up the skill of understanding users, the skill is not increasing a conversion rate. That's another completely different
True.
topic. But if you want to understand users, understand their behavior and the whys and the whats, then actually finding through research something that you want to optimize or just better understand, like some kind of user flow, onboarding flow, and then just starting your first experiments. If you don't have the traffic for A/B testing, there's other ways of validating assumptions or hypotheses. But I think the number one way to actually learn this skill, to learn this craft, is by doing. That's how I did it. That's how a lot of other people have done it. But just by watching videos, I think that's a good starting point. But definitely not definitely not
like
the
you
only
said,
thing you should
there's
do.
lots of options.
Yeah, for sure.
Depends on obviously who you are and what you're looking for. So one of the things that you said was also like it depends on like there's other things than A/B testing. There's like lots of different ways where you can look at something that you want to optimize. I was wondering if you had maybe like a framework that you've often used maybe with like when you're helping maybe a smaller brand that wants to level up their online store. Do you have any kind of common psychological frameworks or things that you've used or see used more frequently, since obviously there's not a one size fits all?
No, for sure. I mean, there's a couple of things, and I'm gonna in one or two sentences also gonna point to Ruben again, and the
Yeah.
resources he has like a super good book on behavioral psychology and
Hmm.
understanding behavior on sites. So I think he has an ebook on that. That's amazing, at least for also a first reference. But there is frameworks that I certainly use either in audits or in fully fledged A/B testing programs with our clients.
Hmm.
That's the 7 levels model. I think it's by Konversionskraft, a German big German CRO agent and experimentation agency. That's certainly one that's you can leverage either for super small companies who don't have the traffic to test, but you still want to basically understand how the site is built up, what opportunities are out there, and really just have a framework to audit a site, right? So that's one. If we go more into the behavior frameworks, one that I always like to look at is the BJ Fogg behavior model. I mean, it's nothing new. Probably a lot of people have heard of it. But
Yeah.
it's basically like using motivation and action, and I keep always forgetting ability. In English, it's a bit funny.
Okay.
Like it's basically having 3 factors and finding the basically the knobs to turn in order to get people to take action or do something, right? So to
Hmm.
enable basically behavior, and this can be applied not only in the online world, but in the physical and real world setting as well. So I think these two, like 7 levels model and BJ Fogg, if you really go deep down, understand them, know how to use them, I think you're set for a while. And of course, there is others like other types of frameworks that we use on a like almost daily basis for clients.
Hmm.
But I think they are a bit more advanced in that it would not make sense to go too deep in this podcast. But
Yeah.
these
Maybe if
two
we have a
these two are
follow-up webinar or something.
hey, I'm
And
open to
then
that
always better to have a little bit more time for more intense subjects. But
for sure.
thanks for dropping those resource recommendations as well as some frameworks that people can check out.
Sure.
Maybe now the kind of practical element. Can you think of maybe any examples? This could be something you saw or someone you worked with, like of any clients or any brands that are really doing it right, quote unquote, when it comes to their kind of conversion or experimentation practices?
Yeah, let me think. It's I'm not a big fan of just saying, "Oh, our client XYZ does it the best,"
Sure,
because
yeah.
that's a bit of. I would think we're doing a really good job, but what I
Hmm.
always like to, and probably this is what I'm doing a lot of the time, is to also
Hmm.
get inspiration from, because it's always so easy to look at yourself, pat yourself on the shoulder, and then not look for what's possible. So even though
True.
looking at Amazon for a lot of times is far fetched, um, that's a great example of how experimentation um, on scale
Mm.
can really make sense. But what I like to do is, because Amazon has a lot of things. If you're looking at marketplaces, right? I think it's hard
Hmm.
um, to compare Amazon with your normal like small e-com shop, because it's a very different game, right? You have like millions
Hmm.
of products, people have a lot of choice, and the way or the decision making process on Amazon is very different. But still for individual products, a lot of things you can, or like the product presentation or stuff like that, there's a lot of things where I like to look at, even sometimes just, oh, this is new. What happened here? What was the thinking process behind it? What could the hypothesis been behind it? And then sometimes months later, I see, oh, this feature is gone. And actually, there is a cool site. It's called goodui.org, I think, by Jakob. He has a whole compilation of sites that I'm not sure how he's doing it, but monitoring and seeing how they change, and an entire repository of experiment findings and results. So that's amazing. But so I think getting inspiration from some of the big players doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, probably can't even, but run that many experiments, or you have to do the same things. But I think the most important thing is to get inspired, but then try to start validating also these ideas you might get from maybe big players, but also maybe from the one brand that does one little thing very, very well, and then validate that against your own customer base, and see if it actually works for you. Of course, just taking something from another page, trying it on your site, is probably not revealing the biggest potentials, right? But this is one way to start. And especially for sites that have already do a lot of user research, I think it's a cool add-on. But not sure if it answers your question, but that's how I like to go about it.
No, thank you. That was very interesting to think about. So indeed, it's not really looking at one brand, but just thinking about how you can pull inspiration from things you see around you and how that might spark like more maybe tailored experiments or things that can work on your kind of unique case-by-case basis. Because I know we've spoken to other people who run CRO agencies who said like they've noticed even from like one client who had like two different shops that were selling different things, like they each needed something totally different, even though it was like there were more things similar than maybe like you in a mass retailer like Amazon. So I think that's quite an interesting idea and approach to use this kind of way to pick inspiration and then tailor it.
100%. Like even if you take two shops, both built say on Shopify, they have almost the same theme, maybe just the logo is different, and similar products, probably a hard setting anyway. But if you look at that and then test one thing on one store and the same thing on the other, you might get totally different results, because the people buying might be totally different. They might be coming there for totally different reasons. The ad, like the frame they have when they come from an ad to your site might be totally different. Could be totally the same. But on average, looking at all the projects I've done, most of the time when we just come with good assumptions, or not most, but a lot of the time they're still wrong. And this is, as a company, this is what I said earlier, you have to be very much open to being wrong. And that's good, because that's where you make progress. When something feels like, when any kind of transition feels hard, this is when you grow. And the same thing applies, in my opinion, to growth online, because nothing ever comes easy. So you really have to dig deep to find what works for you. But if you find that, then you can actually start understanding what's actually happening. That's where, in my opinion, the fun begins.
Nice. Well, I have that actually perfectly segues into my next question, which was going to be, what is one thing you've seen or one thing that you think most online e-commerce brands get wrong when it comes to trying to improve their conversion?
So I talked about it earlier. I mentioned it a little bit. If brands focus on improving their conversion rate, they're already doing something wrong. So this is, I think, one of the core misunderstandings of what a conversion rate actually does, or what it actually means. So let's break that down. A conversion rate basically describes how many of the people on your site do a certain kind of actions, right? So in the case of e-com, this is usually orders, email newsletter signups, or something like that. But if you try to improve that conversion, like, you're going for the wrong thing. What you want to do is you want to understand what drives people to buy your product or to sign up to your newsletter. and change or impact that behavior somehow. But this changing or improving this conversion rate, I mean, it's called conversion rate optimization, so that might be a flawed term. You can look up on LinkedIn, there's a huge discussion around that. But what I'm saying is, like, if we want to focus on the user, if we want to try to improve the user experience, make it easier for them to purchase or just find the information they're looking for, that's where it's getting interesting. But if we like looking at a conversion rate and say, oh, I want to double it, that's so selfish. This is not getting anybody anywhere. A lot of things work for sure, right? There is tons, probably uncountable amounts of checklists and whatever, but most of them are BS because they focus on one thing, the shop. They usually don't focus on user behavior. Of course, some have that in mind, sure. But I think one of the biggest things that shops, even though they might sell, oh, we're customer-centric, whatever, they still oftentimes lack focus on the customer. And I think that sums up a big problem in the industry. But I think putting customer first, understanding what they're about, why they're shopping with you, understanding their behavior, that's how you make progress. It's very basic, but and it's probably for some people it's like, of course, it makes sense. But still, you asked about the majority, and I think the majority focuses on the wrong thing, and that's that.
Yeah, so thinking, I guess, more about the customer journey and their experience, and then knowing that if you kind of invest in that, like that will help the people who you would like to purchase from you. So although I think you had a good point about just focusing on conversion, that is kind of inherently selfish if you think about it through that lens. So very, very interesting.
The truth is, of course, right? This is at the end what makes the business run. The company has to make money. I understand that. And it's not like we as an agency or as a consultancy don't look at that. But the way of approaching that is different. It's not like, oh, we don't care if that like drives more revenue or if the conversion rate increases. Of course not. That's the metrics we measure part of the success by. But the how we approach that is different. So in my opinion, the question shouldn't be how can we increase the conversion rate, because that's just the outcome. How can we increase the experience, as you said, for the user, for the customer? That's the way to actually on the balance sheet see the result. But anything else is, in my opinion, a bit of hocus pocus. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I love a hot take here on Click to Buy. And actually, for our next question, although now you've just given me a lot of thoughts on why we shouldn't think about kind of maybe the money first, I have a question from someone you know, Sander, who's actually would love to know your opinion on how do you calculate the return of investment of your experimentation? So maybe you can expand a little bit on that in the other ways that we can think of this ROI.
Yeah, so it's actually, I think, a good transition, because like on the one case is the business case, where we of course have to look at, for example, if we're building up a CRO program or any kind of investment, has to somehow pay off. And I think one of the ways you can, this looks different for SaaS, but if we look at primarily e-com, and we assume this is easier for larger scale e-coms, because, for example, if we look at A/B testing and the company deploys A/B tests on a regular basis and has a strategy behind what they're doing, then of course you want to make sure that all this pays off. The way you can do that is simply by looking at, for example, one A/B test over the duration of the A/B test, right? In the variation has yielded a certain amount of additional revenue. There's calculators that you can put in your numbers, and then you can like stretch that over, say, 6 to 12 months. That is part of it, but it's not an exact science, because how can you do that? Of course, you can only look at the past data to infer on future data. or on future events. But it still gives you kind of a ballpark. It's of course you have to make sure that you're testing the right things, and that you're not testing, using the infamous examples of button color tests, right? But like if you're doing that kind of tests and like spending a lot of time like figuring out these little details, probably ROI on your experimentation and testing efforts, depending on your level of maturity, are going to be very low. But if you ask the right questions, right? If you use experimentation to answer the right questions, then getting to return of a positive return on invest is like very high, because then you and I think this leads also into the second part of this. It's not just the monetary aspect, in my opinion, how to measure ROI, but it's also the learnings, the mistakes you are not making by actually answering questions that you would otherwise just using guesswork for. So the way I try to think about it is like, how many decisions am I, one, able to make more confidently? Two, how many decisions can I not revert, but like how many wrong decisions can I not make, or can I prevent myself or the company from making? And how much money is that saving? So there's a lot of ways to look at it, but at the end of the day, you have to find a framework that works for you to actually, and this starts with asking the right questions on what is it that you actually want to use experimentation for. And if you're just starting with, I want to double my conversion rate, you're bound to fail, because you're setting like a very high expectation for yourself or to the person that's doing that, but you're also not asking the right questions, and that plays into what I said before, right? But at the end of the day, I think sometimes doing small steps but asking the right questions is the way to go. And then from there, you can, I think, see higher growth and also impact on the entire organization. But yeah, not everything in experimentation can be easily measured. Like, for example, the openness of people to try new things. Right, this is a hard thing to measure. But it's an immense thing if you can get that within your company as a side effect from running experiments. Then that's great, because like that kickstarts innovation in a way, right? So think about that.
That's a really good point. Like there's certain things you can't really put like an amount on, but having that openness, maybe having people be having more of this like mindset to try to take different frameworks and apply it other than just like fixing your web page, but to other parts of the business. Like these are not things you can maybe quantify, but I really like what you said. Like if you're not asking the right questions, you're not going to get maybe the right results that you're hoping for.
Yeah, and it's in the same way. There is so I think about experimentation. If you do it properly, it becomes a business function, or a business like a part of your business. The same way bookkeeping, accounting, or I don't know, the function or the people who clean your offices, right? You can't necessarily measure every aspect of all these departments, but they're necessary, and they're there to not only make sure your business keeps running, but they're also there to make people feel good. And in the same way, I believe something I haven't yet been able to measure that well, but on the long term, experimentation also adds happiness in a company. Not all the time, for sure, but I've had like one specific case that I like to point out or like look at, where in the beginning, when we started out with a client, people were like, "Oh God, we have to do an extra thing now. We have to build tests." And I was like, "Sure," but the management was behind it, so that was great. But at some point, their CMO came to me and was like, "Hey, people actually like running tests now. They see that this has an impact on their work. This makes their work for them more valuable." And if you think about connection, that if people connect more to what they're working on, this, I would say, probably has a good impact on productivity. My personal take, but maybe one that some people are able to take home.
Well, I love that. I think that's such like a positive note to kind of wrap up our discussion. And before I let you go here, I would love to know if you have maybe a question that we could ask our next guest. So our next guest is somebody who's very involved in A/B testing, the A/B testing influencer. I won't spill their name, but think along these lines. If you have any sort of question out there, or if you're just interested in like an alternative opinion.
Yeah, so I have like already a picture of who that could be, based on recent LinkedIn posts. But I'll ask a question that I'm sure he'll have a good time answering, or she, I don't know.
Who knows?
They will have a good time answering. And it's like, how do you make sure you're running the right experiments, especially if you're on a limited resources, right? So case being, you're a small ecom company, so you can only run 2, 3, 4 experiments per month because maybe that's don't have the resources internally, or you don't have the traffic to support more. How would you make sure that you're running the right experiments to actually make sure this program, this invest, has an ROI? I'm curious. I have my personal answer for that, but I'm curious to hear their approach.
Well, we'll get back to you when we've recorded their episode, so you can hear their hot take on this. Well,
Sure.
Thank you so much for a lovely episode together, Nils. If
Thanks.
people want to hear more from you or see any more of your tips, where's the best place that they can find you?
So LinkedIn is a good place. Also, if you just want to reach out or ask questions, I'm always happy to answer or help.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe even too much, but LinkedIn, my newsletter. I post once a week on my newsletter, so that's where you can find me. And also currently building up a new blog to actually help more people with ready-made content and get the CRO juices flowing. So probably on 3tech.de. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure that we include those in the show notes. Thanks again for a great episode. So happy to have had you.
Hey, likewise. And I'm happy it finally happened.
Same. Well, that's another episode of Click to Buy. We'll see you in the next episode.
All right. See you.